Alright, so transport controls, obviously very simple. If you've operated anything that looks like, a tape deck or a VCR or anything like that, you'll know what these transport controls are. Play, fast forward, rewind, step back, step forward, and then you've got your record buttons and all those sort of stuff. So let's just have a look anyway in Cubase, but they should be pretty simple to you. Alright, so transport controls are essential to being able to use the software really. And you can see in Cubase here we have them down the bottom. We can also bring them up with the shortcut F2 in a separate window. And you can see the various settings here. We can also adjust this to show more or less features if we so choose to. Okay, some of the main controls here, we have a stop button, right? And this functions basically like think of old tape decks or VCRs or anything like that. If you've ever used those, it's all pretty simple. Stop is stop. So play just plays our song. So if we've got audio recorded on here, it would be playing. You can see our marker here. This is basically our cursor. This is where we are in the song. We can click stop again. We can jump around if we choose to move our cursor to various spots to click play from a different part of our song. If we have a track set to record enable, so let's find one we can. So let's say this BGV, we want to record a part, we record enable it. Now if we come and click here and click record, it will start recording audio. It's actually recording me talking right now into the microphone, which is great. You can see the play and record lights up, very similar again to the old style tape deck. We used to hold down the two buttons. In our case, we didn't have to hold two buttons down. You just click on record. And I can undo that to get rid of it. Now, if I have a track record enabled and I click play, it will not record, right? You have to actually click the record button to record it. Click play, it's just going to play. The other key one here is the cycle button. So if we turn on cycle, we can actually set a loop. So if I quickly set a loop, so you can see this section up here, I've got basically a start marker and an end marker. If I have this loop control on and I click play, it will play over and over again this little section here. So I can jump it forward just to get to the end. You'll see it'll get to the end and it will jump back to the start. That also applies to recording. So if I go record, I'll do it from here as an example. It will hit the end and it will jump back. So just be wary of that because otherwise it will keep recording over itself as well. All right, so we could stop that. But if you don't want it to do that, even if you have this section defined, if I turn loop off and now I play or record, it will just continue past this section and will not loop back. Right, and even the same thing, if I had loop on and I put the cursor outside of the loop area, I can just click play and the loop area will do nothing because I'm outside of it. Right, so it's not going to loop, it's just going to keep going. Okay, so some other very useful controls that I will show you is some of the track controls. All right, so pretty much every track is going to have most of these features. Okay, so some of the key ones here is our panning. So C is for center, right? And it can vary if it's a mono track or a stereo track. We can pan it across fully to the left, fully to the right, or anywhere in between, whatever you so choose. Okay, we can double click to bring up a thing to type it in. M is for mute. So if we want to quickly, while we're playing the song, not hear this track, we can mute the track. It will go silent. All the other tracks will still play. We just will not hear this one. If we want to hear this track by itself, we can click the solo button. And what that'll do is basically mute every other track but itself. So we will only hear this track now playing back. The E button is the edit channel settings. Now I showed that. That basically hides and pulls up this window. Okay, so it gives us access to all of these extra settings, you know, channel strip, equalizer, you know, strip here, all our plugins we can add, our sends, Q sends, whatever, it's all pretty much here in this window. Once you get into automation functions, we have two buttons here. One is read, one is write. Generally, our first step with automation is to write it. So we click on the write button, that puts us into the write mode. Now we can write automation. You'll see the read button automatically lit up because it just assumes that if you go and write automation, that eventually you'll want to read it. But we can turn that off. With them both off, it will do nothing. It won't write automation and it won't read automation. Now, once we've got automation written, we can then turn on the read automation and then it will actually read the automation and follow it. So if you've got volume increases happening automatically, it will follow those volume increases as defined by your automation. If you wanted to stop it reading that, so even though you've got it set and you've got volume changes happening, if you want it to ignore it for a period of time, just unclick the read button and it will stop reading the automation. It doesn't remove the automation is still there, it just does not read it and does not follow it anymore. We have our record enable button. If that is turned off, even if we click the record button on our transport bar, it will not record this track, right? You can record multiple tracks at once, or you can record one track, right? Whatever you so choose, but it's going to, when we click record on the transport button, it's going to record every track in our project that this button is turned on for. If there's no buttons turned on, it's not going to record anything. If there's one turned on, it'll record that one track. If we have record enabled 5 tracks, it'll record those 5 tracks. If we have every track in our project record enabled, it will record every track in our project. The next button is our monitor button. So if we have an instrument plugged in, an external one, and we want to hear it, we can click on the monitor and you can see now that the meter's moving. That's my microphone as I'm talking moving. And you can see that, right? And potentially you can hear it. It might sound bad right now, I don't know. So I'm going to turn it off so that it doesn't impact, because there could have been an echo for a second there. But that's what you want to do if you want to hear it from the actual recording software. And our main control here is our fader, which is obviously our volume of the track. So, you know, once we get into mixing, or you know, you can even do a little bit while you're recording if your track's a bit loud or you just want to balance your tracks a little bit. You can obviously move this fader so you could make your bass louder, your BGV. You could drop that down so it's not as loud as the main vocal. Whatever you want to do, you can set that there. And obviously there's a little meter here that's going to give you an idea of the loudness of your track. So in Cubase Pro, we have a listen button. This is similar to Solo, but slightly different. And when I say it's similar, it depends on how you have it configured. When you click on listen, and you can turn this on many tracks or one track. Same applies to mute and solo. I forgot to mention that. You can put mute on multiple tracks, or you can put solo on multiple tracks. So then it's not so solo, but it's what you want to hear. Listen is similar by default to solo. Okay, it will basically sound like it's soloing your track, but you can configure it slightly different, and that's how I do it. Okay, so what I do. Okay, so the listen button, as I was saying, can be set up to a different way. Now, I'm not sure if there's another place to set it, but where I set it is in our control room over here. If I click on this main button here, it opens up a whole lot of different settings, like a talk button and stuff like that. But you'll see here we have the listen dim. Now I have it set, in this case here, it's set to minus 14.6. I'm not exactly sure why I set it to that level, but I think I just picked a nice one. Now I think by default, I think it could be down in infinity, which means that it will dim all of the other tracks except for the one that you clicked listen to infinity. So it basically works as a solo. But what I did was I had it set to a level, as I said, which was minus 14.6. That'll do, minus 14.7. And what that allowed it to do was dim the audio of all the other tracks except for the one I clicked the listen button on by that much, by minus 14.6. So what it allows me to do is to sort of get a great combination of solo and not solo. I can hear this track a lot more present, but I can still hear it in the context of the rest of the song. So that's how I use it. So in mixing, I might want to sort of get the feel of solo, but still hear it in the mix. So still hear it in comparison to the rest of the song if I'm doing an EQ change or something like that. So that's where I use it, and that's how I use it. So one other key element that you want to get right in your software for your recording process is the location in the computer of where the files are going to be recorded. Now, this may depend on your computer, whether it's a laptop or PC or a Mac or whatever you're running. But what I always like to say is that to get the best performance, we want to be recording to a different drive from where our operating system is sitting on. So generally, if you're running a Windows computer, your operating system is sitting on the C drive. And that drive, more often now, more common, is now an SSD drive, right? For fastest boot time and all that sort of stuff. That's becoming the sort of default now. You may have an older computer that's still running off hard drives and that sort of thing. That's fine, okay? No problem with that. So what I always say is that what you want to have is at least a second drive for your recording files. So your software and your operating system is sitting on your main drive, which is C drive. In Mac, it's, I don't know what they call it in Mac to be honest, but it's just your boot drive, all right? We want another drive that could be the D drive or whatever you want to label it. And we're going to have a folder in there that we're going to record our files to and all that sort of stuff. Now, that can be an SSD drive, which is more common these days. Obviously, SSDs are quite fast. They are still a little bit more expensive than hard drives these days, and their capacity is not as great as hard drives these days, especially based on cost. If you want big storage, then you'll want to get a hard drive, right? But if you are getting a hard drive, make sure you check the speed of the hard drive. There's usually two common speeds. This is excluding professional enterprise drives. We're talking about home user drives. There's two speeds for hard drives, usually 54 RPM. That's the standard bulk, run-of-the-mill cheap version. The other one is 7200 RPM. Get a 7200 RPM for your recordings, all right? I always say that, don't even question it, just get the 7200. If it costs you a few extra dollars, just get it because that's what you need. You need the faster write speed for your audio recordings. Your audio is going in real time. It needs to be able to record it real time to the hard drive, or as fast as the computer can write to the hard drive. So if you put a slow drive in there, you're going to have performance issues. Now, if you can afford SSDs, they are, as I said, becoming more common because they are inherently fast to start with. They generally just are smaller in size compared to your money value. So what do you pay for a hard drive? You can get a lot larger hard drive than you can for a SSD. Now what I do in my system is that I will have an SSD that is not a massive one, and I will record to that. But then what I do is I will have a third drive, which is a hard drive that is not necessarily a fast one, and I'll store files on that, or I'll store my projects on it, or I'll archive things and copy them over to that to reduce the size of my SSD when I'm not recording. All right, so with our recording location, that's pretty much established at the start of creating the project. So we had a couple of options here when we were creating our project, and one was to use a default location, and you can configure that default location to be whatever you want it to be, and it will remember that for the next time. And you can have a project folder underneath that, whatever you want, or you can go prompt so that when you go and actually create, it will prompt you for a location. So then you can find a space for it, create a new folder, whatever you want to do. And then within that folder, so let's say that's your project folder, within that, it will by default create like an audio folder. And under there, that is where it will record all the actual raw audio. So as I've explained to you, if we were sitting here, we do not want to be running off our main C drive here. So we want to have another drive. So you might want to have a second drive, like a D drive or something like that. Or in my case, I've got a work in progress. And in here, you might have a location and create something, create a folder, and that's where you'll record for this one project. Now you can do that. Obviously, you can record every project in a totally different location. And I suggest you record it in a different folder, but it could be a totally different location as well. Now, as I mentioned early on, we want to set our tempo or BPM of our song up front, lock it in. Sometimes what can happen is if we haven't determined our tempo or BPM and then we go and record some stuff and we adjust that tempo BPM, depending on your software, it may actually automatically adjust the speed of your audio files, which can throw things out, because if you actually recorded at the right tempo, but you just didn't have your project set to the right tempo, when you change it, it could change the speed of those audio files, meaning that they're not in time anymore. In theory, you shouldn't do that, because I'm hoping that you're recording all of your stuff to a metronome that is playing out of your software, because we want to make sure that all our recordings are in time with each other. One of the biggest things that comes across as amateurish when you are recording in a home music studio is instruments that are all out of time from each other. And it's one of the things as a mixing engineer that I will sometimes have to try and correct when I get projects, is that the instruments are not in time. And I have to try and get them in time to make them sound as best as I can. Now, sometimes that's impossible to do, because it can be very hard to edit audio that's already been recorded out of time to try and get it back in time and make it sound good. So what I like to do is make sure that you determine the tempo of your song up front, put it in the project settings, save the project, it's ready to go, it's got the tempo. Then when you are recording every single part that you are recording in your song, you can turn on the metronome, it's playing the click at the right tempo and you're recording to that right tempo. So in theory, all of your tracks will be in time with each other. Okay, so another essential item obviously is to set our tempo, and you can see on the bottom here we have a tempo control down here. So we can adjust that tempo, double click on it, type a new setting, whatever you want to do. We have to turn that off first. Type a new setting and you'll see it adjusted the lines there to sort of suit. You can also do it from this transport control here. So you F2 to bring it up, and again, here it is here. So you can do that. This button here activated a tempo track. So that's why I had to override it. I had to turn it off to manually change this, because otherwise what it would do is you would add a tempo track, and that way you could actually draw tempo changes. So if your song has a tempo change, you can draw them in to this tempo track, and then it will follow that instead of being hard coded to the value I put here. We can obviously change the time signature as well. And then we have our metronome. All right, so we can activate or deactivate the metronome. Again, we can do it different locations. We can even do it on the control room if we so choose, or we've got it down here or on the transport control. This little E button here opens up our metronome settings, and in here we have lots of options like activate, deactivate. We can use a MIDI click, if we so choose, or an audio click, and then we pick what output we want that click to go to, and we can set when it should play that, whether it's click while recording, click while playing as well, so we can have both tick. So even if we play the audio and not record, we can have the click going, the metronome. We can have it do a count in or turn that off. I prefer to use a count in myself, just so it gets my brain into the count before I have to hit, play something on the instrument, but you might be someone that doesn't like that. I actually set mine to 2 bars as well, so you can adjust how many bars count in you need before it starts recording. So in this case here, I've got a count in set, I've got it set to 2 bars. When I click record, it's going to play the metronome for 2 bars before it actually starts recording anything. So by the 2nd bar, I need to start playing because it's going to start recording. And you've got your choose time signature for count in, so time signature at record start position, or time signature project position, or set a custom time signature. You can also adjust all of your click sounds. So like if we had to set the MIDI one, we could actually have it playing a virtual instrument as our click, and what channel to put it out to, and there's lots of things here. We've got the audio click, we can go for custom sounds, or we can use the Steinberg click sound, we can adjust the levels, and we can even create some sort of click sound presets we've got here, and you can probably create your own. These are default ones, so if you prefer to do it to an egg shaker or a cowbell or a wood block, whatever you prefer. If you don't like a standard click, you can pick anything, and then you can create all of these fancy custom metronome profiles and patterns, which I'm not going to go into because I don't really use them. I just use standard. I'm a simple guy. I don't make complex patterns or anything like that, but you can do it. It's all there for you to do.
Right, so basic editing in your software is obviously something you need to learn as well, because even though you're just recording or whatever else you're doing to create your song, you need to be able to edit that stuff, right? Because you're going to do recordings that are, say, bad takes, or you leave a little extra stuff on the end of your recording that, is messy or noisy as you put down the mic or whatever you do. So we need to learn the basics of editing those things. And it's simple tasks like just cutting the audio up, putting fades in, moving files around, because you may want to make the choice of recording the chorus and then just copying that to the other choruses. Totally your choice. You don't need to record every part over and over again. If you get the perfect take, you might want to copy that to all the other parts of the song. So we're just going to run through some of the basics and just cover those features off in Cubase. Again, you'll have to translate to your software if you are not using Cubase Pro.
All right, let's look at some basic editing functions in Cubase. So it's slightly changed now in this version. I've got version 10.5 now, and they've actually got a combined tool here. I can actually show you the old way, which is pretty easy by unticking that, but I'll show you both anyway, just so you can see what the current one does. So anything before 10 will function this way. We have an object select tool up the top here. If we are in this mode, you can see we've just got an arrow. I can pick things as I choose, and if I want to move it around, I just click on it and I move it and let go, and it drops it, right? So I can do that. And that's pretty simple, right? There's special key commands you can do to change your mode. So if I wanted to duplicate this, I could hold the Alt key down while I drag, and it will instantly make a second copy. But these are sort of advanced features, okay? We mainly stick to the basics here, but there's lots of special commands you can do. And this is one of them, is just the select tool and move it around. We also have a range tool. So if we went on the range tool, we can now actually highlight a part. So now when I click, I'm not selecting this audio, I'm just picking a point, but I can also click and drag to select a section, and then I could do functions. So I could, if I had, key command to split it, I could do that to separate that track out or anything like that. Or if I move it so it becomes the hand, I can actually grab it and it will actually move that little section out. So it automatically split it and moved it. Now I can just undo to go back. Now in Cubase 10.5, we can actually click this little equal sign here and it will actually join the two tools, selection and range, together. And now what we'll do, I'll just expand this a bit. We have different locations. So if we are up the top of this waveform, you'll see the cursor changes. At the top, we're in the range selection now. If I go down lower, it becomes the arrow and we become object selection. So now I can object select. Go up to the top, range tool again. Now once I've got a range set, you'll see it automatically change to the hand. If I go down, it becomes the arrow again. Arrow just straight away goes back to that function. If I stay up the top, it becomes the hand, and then I can do that automatically split and move function. Now the other way to copy is to obviously use some controls. We could go up to the edit and go copy, and then I'm over here and I click on paste and it copies that exact audio file over to here. Now, it doesn't copy the file on your hard drive, it just copies an instance of it. So it's actually still one audio file, but it means now it will play that audio file twice, once here and once here. So don't feel that you're using extra hard disk space when you use a copy paste function. You're not. These visual representations in here they're more a reference to your audio. So even if I was to delete or cut this, make it shorter, the original audio file is still there. It's still long and whatever else. It's just we're telling the program only to reference this part of that audio file and only play it. So just keep that in mind. We're not editing the actual audio files themselves. We're editing how our project references those audio files and uses those audio files. We can also do the copy paste function from a right click here. Right, we can right click wherever we want, paste. We can also use our standard key commands of Control C, Control V, copy paste, right? Same as anything else in Windows or whatever your commands are on a Mac, you can do that. No problem whatsoever. Now, if we want to split this audio file up, we have a scissor tool up here. So we can pick the scissor tool and we can come across here and anywhere we want, we can click and it will instantly cut it. It'll cut it, right? We can cut it in lots of spots, whatever we want. And then if we go back to our select tool, these are all separated. We can move them any way we want. We can do a shortcut to get to that. And if we are in our select tool, if I hold the Alt key down, you'll see that it is showing this scissor now. If I click, it's doing a cut, right? And as soon as I let go of the Alt key, we're back to our normal control. So that's sort of a shortcut. Instead of having to pick the tool up here, we can just be in our standard object selection tool and hold the Alt key down and click and it will cut it. Now there's other shortcuts as well, as you'll see here. You could press buttons like, say number 3, and it will suddenly move to the split tool. So those little numbers indicating the number that you can press to shortcut straight to it. Okay, we have some fades and trim abilities straight from this view as well. So we don't have to go to any fancy tools or anything like that. But what we have is a couple of spots. So you can see up the top here, there's a little arrow in each corner. And if we do from the top, you'll see that the arrows change to a sideways. If we move that in, you can see we are now doing a fade. right? It's just a simple straight line fade. So if you want to do advanced fades, you will have to go into the menus to find them. But just to do a simple fade, we can just drag along as short or as long as we want and do that. And we do the same on the other side there. Okay, so it's the top control there. We'll do that. If we want to actually trim the audio without splitting it, just trim the end or the start off, go down to the bottom control and you'll see same sort of cursor, but this time we are actually shortening the waveform and shortening our audio. So if we've got a lot of dead space, we want to trim it off, we can. Same with the start. We can go to the start and trim the start off. We can also grab this little dot up the top here, and this is actually like a gain setting. So we can reduce the volume of our waveform right here in this window. It does not move the fader on our actual track. Our fader is still at 0. This is actually just the audio file's volume on here. And we can take it straight back up to 0 if we so choose.
Now lastly, another thing I like to do is to set up a session template. Okay, so as you get through this recording process, what I would like you to do is to develop your workflow, your style, how you like your projects to look, and create or save it as a template. Now that may mean that you have to do a copy of that project, remove all the audio because you don't want audio in your template. You just want to have the layout. But what I like to have is I like to have all my tracks laid out, named, and they can be generic names because every song's going to be different. Get an understanding of what you usually will add in there, what instruments you use if you're using virtual instruments, what the inputs and outputs are, have them all set, what the color coding is, if you can color your tracks in your software, and the layout, whether you use folders, all of that, structure it out, and then save it as a template so that when you go to get on to, say, the second song, you can just pull up that template and all the hard work you did to structure and work out how you like your songs to look in your recording software will already be done. Then it's just a matter of you just customizing it to this particular song and recording your parts. And it's simple. It will save you so much more time than doing everything from scratch every single time.
When I create songs for the first time, I like to create session templates out of them or out of it. Going forward. Now I've already got my template set up the way I like, so that's all great. So here's an example of my session template, and I suggest that you build your own. As I said, if you are very new to this is the first time you're going to record a song, you're probably going to build it manually as you go, and I will show that process as we get into the recording stage. I'm not going to use my template. I am going to build it from scratch just so you can follow along and see exactly how it's done. But what I suggest is once you actually do get a layout that you like, that you do save it as a session template so that your next song, you can pull up that template and you've got most of it laid out. Now, you may need to tweak it, and you'll tweak it as you go, and as you get more experienced, you'll adjust and change things. So various things here, like I like to use folders, right? So you'll see there's all folders here. They're all color coded. I use the same colors for these instruments all the time. And buses, I've got a bunch of buses that I send all my tracks to group them all together. And I have some shared effects here because I'm recording. I don't really go into elaborate effects. I just have a verb in case I want it. That will be heavily expanded when I get into mixing. Then I'll basically have a drum folder with all my drum tracks in here. And these will be deleted, used, whatever. They're sort of different virtual instruments. So, this is what I mean. It's about a bit of a template to give me a starting point, and I may remove and delete things. I'll have bass, guitars, whatever, all laid out. On top of that, I also have these sort of markers up the top here that I can move and adjust to set the different sections of the song, so that if I wanted to jump to a section, I can quickly see on the markers where it is, and I can use shortcuts if I want to jump to it. If you have a preferred default tempo, you can change that. So like, let's say for instance, you do EDM tracks, you might have a tempo that you use pretty much all the time. So you can predefine that in your session template, so you don't have to change your tempo ever. You know, I mean, you still can change it, obviously, if you are suddenly doing a song that's different, but you know, Cubase defaults to 120, but you might have a different setting that you prefer to use. And I like to save this as a project as well, so that I can keep coming back and opening it as a project to adjust and tweak my template. But once I've also got my template, then you just open File and you come down to Save as Template, and you'll see here some ones that I've already got created. You can put in a name and you can give some attributes or whatever you want, and you click OK and save it. All right, and you'll see I've got ones here that I've already got saved, as I said. And that's where, once you've saved that, if you go to New Project and you go across to More, you will then see these are your templates. So you will then pick the one you want. So let's say, for instance, I want a recording template that's blank, so it has no virtual instruments. I can then click that, and I can click Create, and then I'll pick my folder because I've got it to prompt. And suddenly I've created a new project with all of these tracks laid out the way I want them, ready to go, ready for me to start recording. Now the trick is that when you do create this template, you want to have all of your audio files deleted. Okay, so if you are going to base it off your song that you just created, which I will show you how to do this when we get to that step, you will probably want to first save this as another copy, or back up the project to somewhere else. Then once you've done that, I would then delete all the audio files, because you don't want audio in your template. Now you can keep it in there if you wish. So let's say, for instance, you are somebody that uses some predefined samples all the time, or you like to use some Foley samples or something like that in all your tracks. You could have them embedded in your template, and they will always be there in your template. For someone like me that's creating songs, I don't necessarily have default samples, so I don't save them as part of my templates, but you can. You could have audio files that you like to use, one-hit samples and all that sort of stuff, and keep them all in your project so that they're there every time you open it up. You can definitely do that. But otherwise, I remove all the audio so that I've got basically a clean template with no audio in it. It's just got the virtual instruments I want to use or may want to use, or just the track layout and the bus layout. Whatever you prefer your template to be is how you want to do, right?
So if you have any questions about using your software or about Cubase that you want to ask me, please feel free to put them in the comments. I can't guarantee that I can answer every single one of them, but I will try to help wherever I can. So I'm not a prolific, advanced user of Cubase. I know how to do what I need to do in Cubase. I know how to use a lot of the features, but there's quite a lot of features in Cubase that I don't even go near and I don't use. So I can't claim to be an expert on those, but I'll try to get you any help that you need if you just ask the questions. Hopefully this video has been helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.